Good morning. If you're seeing or hearing this, it means you're watching this on the public podcast feed, which means that this episode came out about 5 months ago. Today's episode is with my friend Lindsey, and we're going to talk a lot about homeownership in France and the joys and nightmares of it, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. Lindsey's an amazing friend, and it's a great conversation. If you'd like to catch up on the entire second season, it is available now in its entirety to my patrons on the members only feed. So hop on over and get caught up there if you'd like to. Otherwise, enjoy season 2 as it rolls out over the next few months. And we'll be talking about my road to citizenship on the other side. Lots of updates going on the season 3 members only feed right now. But you'll get caught up to it in no time and enjoy the show.
And then what we gotta do is
Swanson. Swanson.
podcast. So let's sync it all up. Podcast. You can see like that's red dots that are letting you know that it's recording here.
Oh, got it.
Anyways, it's a really nice little setup. By popular demand, I have Lindsey Tramuta here with me this morning. Literally by popular demand, there was a vote on Patreon, and she was requested to be the first guest on this second season.
Quite a mood booster to see that.
Just like a cup of coffee in the morning, right?
Right.
Super popular. But unfortunately, I don't think that we ended up sourcing any questions from them. Everybody just said that they love
Everyone's
you.
on vacation.
No, but they love you. They left comments. Like, honestly, Dixie, we were talking about a minute ago, said, honestly, I can't think of any questions, but I vote Lindsey because I would listen to her talk about anything.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
That's really lovely to hear.
Yeah, so there you go.
Especially in a week where I've just been going nonstop between sweating and wondering how I'm going to survive ongoing heat waves and feeling like I'm just going to become more and more useless and therefore have less to say because all I'll be talking about is the heat.
I feel that. Well, let's not stop there because Judy said she appears to be kind and caring and quite knowledgeable about current events.
Oh, yes, I'm perhaps too knowledgeable to my own demise.
I've been trying to get her off Twitter.
No, I've taken it off my phone.
Oh, good for you.
Okay, so, here's the secret.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a secret.
You're never on your phone anyways.
No, I had it on my phone.
Yeah.
No. I deleted it from the home page,
Yeah.
so I have to take extra steps to open it, but it does help curb my scrolling.
It's good.
So it was like a baby step.
Yeah.
Because I'm not fully ready to just use it on web.
I should do that, to be honest, because I've done the same thing with Twitter and Instagram, but I've found that I'm just really quick at finding them again. Like you get used to it where they are.
But my instinct isn't to say, oh, I have a free moment. Let me just, open Twitter and see what people are saying because it invariably makes me feel like garbage. So it's like, let's put a little buffer in here.
Yeah, Twitter is not good for the blood pressure.
But it's really, like Instagram does other summons
damage.
other damage and summons other emotions.
I avoid.
So.
I just don't like Instagram for so many reasons. Anyways, Twitter I find to be at least informative and entertaining, partially because they actually show me who I'm following.
Oh yeah.
Partially because I think there's just a lot more interesting stuff that's put out there. Where Instagram is like this. It's both aspirational, but also like just the classic Keeping Up with the Jones type stuff where there's just, it can be inspiring, but a lot of the time, like I enjoy the pixel artists that I follow and a bunch of the random pet accounts, but then Instagram also knows that like I'm a single man, so all of a sudden there's just beautiful women that pop up, and then there's a lot of Space Invaders stuff still, which I'm not as interested in anymore.
Weird, so it hasn't filtered that out.
This doesn't filter anything out, I feel like.
Not filter, but like the algorithm is supposed to learn.
I don't know that it learns.
It just learns to saturate you with, opportunities to consume.
Yeah. And then it's always like, would you like to follow this person? It's like, I'm not following this person. Why am I seeing this? But this is the classic thing there. But so some of the things we're also going to talk about. Basically, I was going to say, Patty wants to know about your view on homeownership. So in France. Ooh. So we're going to talk about homeownership in France, which is interesting because I dream of having an apartment someday that I can call my own, and or a chateau, as we've talked about before. Who knows? The kind of extremes there. Also going to talk a lot about the mini teaser documentary version of the documentary I wanted to make. And more about that, because we've never talked about the Secret Project #1, Kill the Swimmers, at length, or I've never really revealed anything about that until I released the video. So this is going to be the first time we really dive into that. And then just banter, probably talking a little about Cooper, who I have hidden. He's in his kennel, but we decided to hide him because he's going to be a little bit too distracting all around. Huh, buddy? And yeah.
Mostly for me because I can't help myself.
He's so cute, but he also needs to take a nap. And whether or not he takes a nap while we're sitting here,
He's gonna chew on a bone.
he's got chews in there. He's ready to chew it up. And yeah, just life and love and liberty and Paris in August and all the things.
All the things.
So welcome to season 2 of Garage Monologues, starting with a monologue.
A non.
What do you call a dialogue? That's what it's called.
What do you call a conversation between two people?
What is a conversation called again? I don't remember. So let's start though with that. It's curious because I was actually looking at. So I go back and forth between wanting to get like an atelier somewhere in Paris, or like a chateau way the heck outside of Paris, or an apartment in Paris.
Right. So my thought on a chateau is that it is so costly.
It's like owning a boat on land. Yeah.
To maintain.
Yeah.
And to fix up and to make and to heat. You know, all these people who venture into these projects, I think, like, should put up warnings when they start, you know, invariably starting a YouTube channel or having a podcast about it, because, like, just think about the moment we're living in and the cost of electricity and heat.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a crisis basically, and I can't even fathom what it costs them to maintain these properties.
Yeah.
And I say that having a small house outside of Paris that also is not like it has a fuel tank. It's not the most efficient, and you know, we can't yet afford to transition that into something more efficient. And as soon as we do, if we were to stop using fuel tank, then it's like there's no going back, right? So, but we've seen the price of fuel basically skyrocket like this, and then it's starting to come down. But I mean, a lot of houses in the French countryside or even suburbs are on fuel. So, you know, you have to have this big ass truck that comes and, you know, fills your fuel tank, and it smells like, you know, a bit like gasoline in your garage, but whatever. This is the
what
way
kind of fuel are they? Is it propane or is it?
I guess.
Okay.
This is my ignorance speaking. I just know, you know, we also have a septic tank because because in our village there's a certain point, you know, a certain house after which everything is on septic and it's not on city sewage.
Yeah.
And the question about, you know, when is that ever going to change? Is the city going to extend? You know, it's like a big question mark, and it could be 15 years from now. So, and that's true in a lot of places outside of cities in France.
Yeah.
So there are things to consider, right? A house is certainly more manageable than a chateau, which, you know, conceivably has a lot that you'll have to repair in a bigger sense too, to make it livable, or at least, you know, safe to be in.
Yeah, not a hazard.
Apartments too, because we've owned an apartment. It has its own issues, and you deal with, you know, neighbors who don't want you to do anything. You can't change things without approvals. Now that's true in other cities. You know, New York City, if you have what do they call it, like a co-op, you know, you have to get approvals to do anything sort of cosmetic or aesthetic that people might take offense to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can't just like build a balcony or something if it's not already there. But I think it's still possible for a lot of people with more modest means to own something in this country.
Yeah.
And, you know, what people are always astounded by is how much the government, not the government, but like, well, government and banks are not about to just like dole out loans.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's why we had a housing crisis, or, you know, there was the subprime housing crisis that, you know, obviously caused a whole...
Overlending. Yeah.
Yeah. All that overlending is just not what's done here.
No. Well, it's...
Just like there are no credit, you know, you don't have credit card debt here. Because even with an American Express card, some people don't realize this. Yes, American Express exists here, but I had one for a time and then canceled it because the fees are ridiculous. But anyway, and you can put off your payments, you know, to the end of a month, but it still will come out of your account automatically, out of your bank account, to pay off that credit card bill at the end of a month. Like, you have 30 days. You can't just keep pushing off the payments and paying minimum installments or whatever. Like, that is not a thing. And so, and I'm sure in other parts of Europe, it's not a thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually don't know what the credit landscape is like across Europe. To bring people up to speed with that, like the French system only allows you to take out like what 30% of your overall income as a debt repayment.
You can't go beyond 35 or 36% debt. You can't. Yeah, your debt can't be more than 35%. So
of your gross monthly income.
right. So if you have my husband and I have are stable, but when we were trying to get the loan for our house, we were just over, like maybe we were 37% because we rent an apartment in Paris we're paying surely too much for.
Yeah.
And it sort of put us over the threshold. And because this is COVID times still, and the banks have been very conservative because of that, they really didn't want to budge on it, even though this is the bank that we had our first loan with and everything, and there's history there.
Yeah.
But it can be tricky. So it eventually worked. But, like, they don't want you to just be in a hole of debt that you can't ever get yourself out of.
Yeah. Which is understandable.
Well, because it's like, what good is it going to do the economy ultimately if people can't?
Yeah. That comes.
Now,
I'm on board with that. Yeah.
Now, there are other problems in France. For example, like the whole movement to get people to buy diesel cars. And then they're like, oh, wait, 25 years later, we now need to phase that out. Now you guys all should stop driving or get an electric car or a hybrid car. And it's like, okay, I'm barely making ends meet.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people who rely on their cars. And so there are other areas where things could have been done better here.
Sure.
Like that sort of movement toward more ecological means of transportation. And everyone loves to cite how good public transit is here, but there are still dead zones or areas where people are absolutely reliant on their cars.
Yeah.
You look at even in the Alps, people who work in a different village or whatever. There's no, like, maybe there's a bus.
Yeah,
but
you get far out. Yeah, but nobody's trying to stop them from driving in the same way that Paris is actively trying to stop you from driving.
There is still a big push to get people off diesel cars.
Yeah,
right,
which is understandable.
So
ultimately and I guess that is always going to be the question, right? Like you do have to push at some point, otherwise change won't happen on its own.
Right.
But it's a hard balance to strike. And I think especially, it's interesting that like the Gilets jaunes never came back, at least not in the big public way that they were before, because those problems haven't gone away. And there's definitely a lot of people that are still really struggling to make ends meet in France as globally.
I wonder if it's because now there's a whole additional group of people who are struggling for different reasons, whether it's because they're first responders or whatever, and they're just completely burnt out.
Yeah.
Or they're they work in hospitals or people who have lost their jobs. And so now you've got the yellow vest type mentality, but then you have a whole other set of the population who are struggling maybe for different reasons. And so if the yellow vests were to sort of pick things back up and also disrupt life when it's already hard enough now for extra people, I don't know. It just occurred to me maybe that there's
that's why. I never found them to be quite that
thoughtful.
Self-aware.
Right.
I mean, given that they, anytime that anybody actually seemed to like at the beginning, there was a very different movement than what got co-opted into what it became, and then what it became, they ate their own. Like anytime anybody stood up to be like, okay, let's make some actual demands, let's like move this forward, they would just destroy them, and so just kept it in this perpetual cycle of just unprogressive anger, I guess. Like it wouldn't actually move forward. Nothing actually changed. It just kind of like was a consistent part of our lives for so long.
Maybe some of those people were also anti-vaxxers and are not doing well. I don't know.
It's possible. Well, I don't know. I wonder if they just lost I wonder too how much you could stay motivated, like how much it became just a ritual that like once the ritual was broken.
Right.
Because they didn't stand for anything anymore. Very much. They just.
Well, by the end, it was very nebulous.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, they had their go-to talking points, but yeah, they weren't actually trying to change anything by the end. So, anyways, so you're saying that you should not buy a house that's fuel reliant necessarily.
Look, we also only have one bathroom in a house that is supposed to be fit
and no
a
central
family.
air.
No central air, but actually, we don't need it. I mean, if you're choosing the materials. like, or you're choosing a house based on its materials,
Right.
it may be okay. Ours is a stone house that keeps it cool.
Does it keep it cool now when you're out there? Oh,
yeah,
It's not bad?
yeah. The downstairs, the ground floor, where you have the sort of majority of stone everywhere on the walls, it's much cooler.
That's good.
So we have a dehumidifier because that's another problem.
That is a problem.
The other thing people might not know, and perhaps it has to do with the age of the house you're looking at, but there's no foundation. The house is built into the soil.
That's interesting.
So if it's very damp,
How is there no foundation?
foundation, there's clearly a foundation to the house, but I mean, there's no like basement, right? There's no buffer between the soil and everything else. And so if it's very damp or just not even particularly damp, just, after years and years of existing and rain and all that, it does get into the stone, right? And then depending on what the sealant is between the stone, it's either breathable or not breathable. And so we have an issue where it's like you'd have to redo the whole house and all the sealant, which is not
just
viable.
rebuilding the house,
That's not viable. So you try to sort of come up with these Band-Aids or these solutions because actually fixing and solving the problem in a big way is not that possible. So one thing you do is keep windows open as much as possible to ventilate.
Yeah, which I love doing anyways.
Right. Although in the winter, a bit complicated.
Yeah.
So we had to get a dehumidifier. But, I have friends who, one of my friends who lives in D.C. who built a house.
Yeah.
Also has a dehumidifier in his basement. And it's a new build because it's just...
I feel like that's a thing here, though, too. Like, that's the classic, especially Parisian, but even outside of that, like, basement smell, like the cave, Like, there's just always that borderline moldy, mildewy smell everywhere, which is actually sometimes kind of charming. Like, it's not, I don't hate it all the time. Depends on how strong it is and where you're at and what it's getting onto. But, yeah, it's a smell that I almost associate more with, like, just Europe. It's not a smell that I ever ran into back home. Which maybe that's a West Coast thing because we're drier.
Could be because in the house I grew up in on the East Coast.
Did you have that smell?
Yeah, there was a basement smell.
Yeah.
Not extreme because the house wasn't as old as the houses here.
Sure.
And also we would sometimes have flooding.
Well, related smell too. I wonder. I've never thought about this, but maybe that because like the how churches have a smell.
Yeah. But is that wood? Isn't it like a combination of incense and wood? I wonder.
That's the thing. It's all of it. Yeah, I always thought it was like a specific wood smell.
It's a church smell.
But it is a church smell. It's a very specific smell. And so, but I never thought maybe that's also partially like the moisture creeping up into the walls.
Who knows? Yeah, these are very good questions that I'm sure
someone has
an
answer
architect or a contractor.
We just walk down to Notre Dame and start asking those guys, like, hey, while you're here.
They're like, we can talk to you about lead.
Yeah, I was going to say de-leadifying the place.
I don't know that we can talk to you about moisture.
Yeah, what is Notre Dame going to smell like after this? That's going to be interesting.
Well,
I cannot wait to go back.
They're saying it's on track for 2024, which I think is like seriously ambitious.
But they're also pushing really hard. Like
you know who
progress they've made.
Macron wanted that.
He's
like,
a
for the
feather in his cap.
Olympics.
Yeah, it's a feather in his cap.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't really know why that has to be a goal. Maybe the goal should have been getting the Grand Paris Express train from the airport done in time for the Olympics.
I'm not going to say that his priorities are straight, but the difference is, like, I feel between those two, now we're jumping into French politics, but I feel like the difference between those two is that the Grand Paris, that line, the metropolitan transportation system crosses like 5 different authorities.
Yes, you're right.
And like I agree, like it's so frustrating that they can't get it done, but they also can't get anything like that done very quickly. And Notre Dame is like one solitary building project.
You're absolutely right. It's not the same jurisdiction.
It's an easy win, and it's also it is a huge part of French heritage that like is like one of the most recognizable landmarks. So to have that open again when the world saw it burn for the Olympics I can see that being that's a really nice symbolic. France is back open,
I wager that it will be delayed.
Yeah, it's very likely.
They say all these things, they publish these, press releases and whatnot, and it's.
Paul and I did a really fun. So I'm gonna put it in the unique experiences video that I'm making for Paris in My Pocket. But we went and did a VR experience.
Oh yeah,
in Notre Dame, in La Défense.
Oh, because they have it at the Collège des Bernardins as well.
Interesting.
A VR thing.
It was super cool. Like, because you have a huge room you get to walk through, so you can see like you can see people like ghosts kind of around you, but then it walks you through the building of the church and just the through the ages. It does a very quick like, yeah, the revolution happened, and then moves on. Like, it's really funny. Like, if you know your French history and you know how badly they treated the church, they just kind of skip that part. Like, literally it just goes to black and it's like revolution. You hear, oh, ching ching, oh, like little battle sounds, whatever, and they're like, and moving on. And I was like, what? It would have been fascinating to see their depiction of how ruined the church was at the time, because it was in an estate, supposedly an estate. It was in a state, supposedly turned it into like stables, and like, you know, that's famously why Napoleon had to cover it for his coronation. Like, they covered everything in cloth, was because it was in such bad disrepair. They didn't want the Pope to see how badly they'd abused the church.
Ooh.
That's the rumor, at least. So when you go see the painting of him like being coronated and you see all the drapes.
Was that in that book you had me get on Napoleon?
It might have been.
That I still have not read. But
Yeah, I think it might have been, actually. Yeah,
it is such an intimidating size.
it is huge. That's why I'm glad I got it in ebook size, because I never saw how big it was.
Yeah, but on ebook,
It's true.
It just says you have 7 million hours
Yeah,
left
exactly.
to read
You
this.
will die before you finish this book. It's like, well, okay, cool. I still haven't finished it.
You
I'm
haven't?
like probably 2/3 of the way through. But it's really fun. It's a great book too, because then you start to see like how where all the names of streets and stuff come from downtown. Where like Rivoli and all these were like, why would they name? It's like,
So what's the story about Rivoli?
It's a
do you remember?
battle that he won. So
Oh.
it's Rivoli. I'm trying to remember the details of the battle itself. It was a messy. I have images in my head of it being a messy battle, like near a river, and there's a scene in my head. This could be wrong though, because I might be thinking of a different battle, where he literally ended up walking like onto the bridge under fire just to check things out, and then back. And this was during his Italian campaign, so it was very early on. But a lot of stuff they went back and like renamed after battles and so
is
forth.
that why it kind of sounds like it might be ravioli?
Ravioli, exactly. Yeah,
I've had
the French-
foreigners be like, do you know that street,
That
Rue
ravioli?
Ravioli Street? I know. Okay.
Yeah, but
There's not an A.
it's actually a French mistranslation in the end. It is the Battle of Ravioli. They just misspelled it on the first street signs and couldn't go back on it. No, it is a good book. I need to get back to it. There's another book that I have here that was recommended to me by a lawyer friend that is like all the modern history of France since 1870 is the title of the book.
Whoa.
And it's a tome, and I need to try getting back into it, but I remember it just being super dry. And look at how fine that print is.
That looks like textbook size.
It is basically a
layout.
textbook. Oh, wow. We'll jump straight to World War II there. Okay, anyways.
Oh.
Yeah, little Cooper snores if you hear those in the background.
Cooper just had a deep breathing.
He's sick
moment.
of our nonsense.
So yeah, housing, there's no right or wrong answer to,
Which question?
to like,
Oh, what?
should you or should you not buy property here? Obviously, the closer you are to a big desirable city, the better the value.
It's crazy because I was looking at every once in a while I just get on to look around. I don't torture myself too much with it, but occasionally I'll be like, and I went to a site and that had just kind of stats on, I think it was about mortgages and how it all works. And I'm familiar with most of it now, but they were listing like the average price per square meter, and obviously in Paris it's about 11,000 euros per square meter,
which is insane.
Which is a lot. So I don't know how much that would translate to per square foot, but basically like my apartment is 13 square meters or about 140 square feet. So 13 square meters in the 16th probably would cost you just a little bit over average or around average. So we'll just say 11,000. So that's going to cost you
Might even be less
150
here.
grand, something like that.
Yeah.
For 140 square feet.
No, I know, it's insane.
It might be a little bit less here, but the prices are definitely going up.
The worst for me was seeing that in, really unpolished or rundown, still not very developed areas of like the fringe neighborhoods, like really far out, not particularly desirable in any sense of like there being a community feel.
Right.
Seeing 10 to 11,000 euros a meter square, and that's where I'm like, no, this is bananas. But Paris is always going up. It fluctuates. So there were a couple months ago, I think, where it really was super high, and it's starting to go down a bit. But it also means if you do want to invest in something like that,
Sooner
it will
than
still
later.
right sooner than later, but it will still pay off. Now the problem is
I'm never going to be able to catch up. That's what it feels like is the problem.
well, and then that's where you could say, well, maybe I own in a not
So-
a second tier city, but even in the countryside.
Marseille,
somewhere.
though, that's what I was going to say, averages just over 2,000 per square meter.
However,
It's like a
there's-
fifth the price.
there are other issues in Marseille, which is why I have friends who were going to buy in Marseille,
Yeah.
and then all sorts of shady stuff regarding the health of the building, contractors.
Yeah, but that happens here too.
Yeah, but there's
Like there's areas of Montmartre I've been warned away from because it's like the side of the hill that's over towards Chateau Rouge. Supposedly, like the foundations are built on stone that is like unsafely wet or something. Like
Interesting.
yeah, Laura was telling me about it. French Laura, she bought near La Marque, and she was like, yeah, like that. There's a section of the hill there where the foundations are actually not good.
well, when you do go to put an offer in an apartment or a house,
That'll be an exciting day.
you get even if you're considering making an offer.
Yeah.
The real estate agent will give you the what do we call that? Like it's legally
a
obligatory
report?
to have sort of like an inspection document.
Yeah.
It's called a diagnostic.
Yeah.
And
A
they ha-
diagnostic.
Right. It's true. We do use that word in
We
English.
do use it. It's true. I gotcha.
but I think the closest homeowner word would be inspection. It's
Right,
sort of
a home
like,
inspection,
like
yeah.
a home inspection report.
Yeah.
And that's a legal requirement. And in it, they even have a geology
Ah.
section where they look at the land and they look at probability of movement and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So in an area like that, that would be indicated.
Should be in there, yeah.
So if you were considering a place like that, then you could say, oh, warning, red flag, there's all of this movement or soil issues. Maybe I don't want to invest here.
Right. Well, and that was what she picked up on, and I think that I think if you live, like she's lived in Montmartre for like a decade, so I think you get to know these things just in talking to people, anyways. But I definitely want to take the time at some point. I hope. So one of the projects that I want to jump into, and if you're listening to this after it's already launched, then you're definitely not a patron of mine, but my patrons will know ahead of time, is the Road to Citizenship, right? Like I want to do road tripping around France, learning what it means to be French, from different regions, like what it means to be Basque or what it means to be like from Marseille or whatever, and just asking people like, okay, what does it mean to be from here? What makes you proud? What skills should I learn, or what should I learn to make? Or so cooking and making wine or pastis or whatever, because there are different regions that have different versions of pastis. I don't even like pastis, but I'm here to learn. So like going through that whole thing, I think it'd be really, really fun. And this is kind of part of that, like that journey of like, okay, like, well, what should I know? What should I avoid? Where should I go? And in that process, one of the things that I want to do, even just personally, and probably just personally, but I do want to make a heat map in Paris of like where I would want to live. I already know different areas, obviously.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, very, like there's certain areas that I would definitely like love to be. But just to keep that dream alive too, because I do feel like sometimes it can feel a little bit daunting and overwhelming. Like, am I ever going to find a place? Am I ever going to actually make this work? And a lot of that just comes down to me stopping taking all of my money and putting it towards risky projects that like never go anywhere. And maybe I should just keep some of it for myself. But
Hey, you said it, I didn't.
I'm learning slowly but surely. But then my new accountant pulled out like $1,500 from my account today. I gotta ask them about that, but I think that's just like half the fee for the year.
Oh yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so it's not bad.
They just don't give you a warning.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're just like, wait, what?
Where
did that go?
I saw things saying, hey, this company just pinged your direct debit. Like you can reject that if you don't want it. I was like, oh no, that's okay. And then the next day I was like, what? They took how much money away from me? But that's life. We're gonna talk about. We should talk about the swimmers.
We can talk about the swimmers.
But I'm gonna pause and start the camera again really quick, because otherwise it's gonna die on its own, and we just won't even catch it. So take this as like, if you're a patron, you're not gonna get an ad break here. But if you're not a patron, you should go become one so you don't get an ad break here. But thanks to whoever paid for the ad break, I really appreciate it.
Why was it not?
It stops at 30 minutes automatically. I've needed a new camera for years. Bless
Excuse
you.
me.
But then my accountant keeps taking the money that I would otherwise spend on camera. So here we are. So then I just have, if we don't pay attention to that, then there'll just be a big gap where there's no video. And I had a second camera running before, but it just adds so much complexity. So it's like, I'll just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. People are here just to see you. And,
I'm pretty sure they're here first and foremost for you.
yeah, I hope so. But, but they're definitely here to see you too. Because Lindsey's been aware. Were you aware of the swimmers video from the very beginning? When did I clue you into that?
No sponsor for this episode. Today's episode is brought to you by my patrons. Patreon, if you're unaware, is a platform, a membership platform where you get some extra perks and behind the scenes benefits to my vlog, to my podcast. On the podcast side, it means you get my podcast episodes as they drop, a full 5 to 6 months in advance of the public feed, which is pretty cool. But then there are a bunch of other perks as well, including early releases of my videos, credits, loyalty stickers, postcards, all kinds of stuff. If you'd like to support my channel, my YouTubing, my podcasting, the most direct way you can do so is through patreon.com/jswanson. It really means so much. So thank you so much for supporting my channel, for listening to my show at all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode chatting with Lindsey Tramuta.
Because Lindsey's been aware. Were you aware of the swimmers video from the very beginning? When did I clue you into that? It's pretty early on.
It was in, I don't know, maybe...
Summer of 2020?
No, definitely not.
No?
No. I was a later...
Comer?
I think probably a year ago you told me.
Okay, so like last summer.
Yeah.
Did I tell you? I feel like I told you sitting out in a square and said joined after I said
Oh,
it's
yes.
your husband.
Yes, you told me. Yes, it was last summer then, because you told me we were sitting outside at Les Petites Indécises.
Yep.
And then Ced was coming back from rock climbing.
Yep.
And he joined us for a beer. And then you gave a sort of shortened version of this. And I had just gone through my whole, what now?
Yeah.
You what? And then he was just, he's more of a listener anyway. And so I think he was like, wait, is this for real? But it's very easy to sort of impress him. Wow. Not in the sense of like, okay. No. I mean, in the sense that like, no one he knows would ever do anything like that. Whereas I think I know more people with sort of like kooky projects and I think he's just more, he's got a network that's more straight and narrow and, like you don't do these sorts of ambitious things.
To be fair, even within my circle, I don't know anybody else that's really going to do.
Well, I mean, it's kooky in the sense that it's unexpected, but it's not kooky as in like,
why the hell?
Why?
Yeah.
It's more like, oh, this already once. I mean, people who know you would know that this is already something that you were curious about.
Yeah.
And I think when you have curiosity for something, you can't sort of stop it at just being a topic of conversation. You need to sort of see where it goes. So I wasn't entirely surprised. I just think I didn't even know I didn't know the backstory, so I didn't know it was a thing that had been of interest to you.
Had been brewing
or
percolating
or stewing or stewing.
Over time. There's a lot. See, this is the thing. We missed out on so many good puns and jokes in a longer format of the video. That's okay.
Look, if you wanted to make it an investigative documentary for HBO, I mean, maybe it would be 10 years from now because...
I know. That's the thing. Well, that's why I ended up doing it. I think, so some backstory, because I think I gave the backstory of why I did it, but like when I started doing this originally, I was originally much more motivated by the fact that there's just no solution, and it kind of, I feel... There's so many feelings actually, like about feeling like wanting to take responsibility, but also being kind of scared of the possibilities you feel powerless ultimately. Like there's nothing you can do about it beyond a couple of things that, again, like if a condom breaks, that's the end of the road for you as a man. Like it's out of your hands. Hopefully you're with somebody who can talk about it and whatever else, but like you just kind of have to wait and see. And then, just on the other side of it where it's like you do see, I think what's fascinating about it is how ignorant we are to so much of this, especially as men, we don't know. But there's so many women that are also very unaware of like the options that are out there, or that have ever really thought through the possibility that like this medicine that I am taking or these hormones I'm putting in my body might be screwing with me in a way that like...
I think most women know, but we don't have an alternative.
Yeah.
It's either, and that's why in some very backward schools they say, well, abstinence.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's clearly not a safe way to inform people. Like that's not going to help them on long term.
Not likely. Yeah.
But yeah, I think also men have been sort of told this is just how it works. So there's not even the interest to try to solve the problem.
Well, I think that's the main thing, right? Is it's the status quo. It's just the way it is. And so men and women really don't question it that much. I think that's changing. I think that generationally it's really changing. I took some polls on Instagram and I think it was mostly men that responded, but it was interesting to see how many men had thought about it. Where I think a decade ago, hardly any would have really thought about this question. So I think that's also, so it's the timing thing in that sense too, where I think with everything going on back in the States politically, and then seeing Johnny Harris's video come out about it and him asking the same question, and then everybody I feel like everybody's missing it, and I don't know if that's just because everybody's aware of it and just nobody thinks it's going to work, or if just nobody's aware of it, or what the deal is. So I kind of want to just like, okay, well,
I can tell you that already. I did a story recently on an AI fueled tool to help women athletes or just sporty women optimize their performance.
Yeah.
And it was based on the insight, the founder based it off the insight that there's a huge health gap. And something like 20-something% of all clinical studies are even done on women.
Yeah.
So we keep applying insights about men's health to women. And so that tells you something, which is that there's not the same focus, interest, attention, concern, whatever, on fixing this problem. Because it's like women have just shouldered the burden of this for so long. Well, it's, like you said, status quo, but I think it ties into the serious problems we have in health overall.
Yeah.
It's why women are constantly, their pain is ignored or undervalued. It takes so much work to convince them to advocate for themselves when doctors are like, you're just depressed, your hormones, you're this, you're that. Oh, and it's like, specifically when it comes to the disorder, I guess is it a disease or an affliction? I don't know how to call it, but like endometriosis, which is notoriously difficult to diagnose. And part of that is because people have been, just brushing off women's pain for so long. And when you have male doctors who do that, because they're themselves not going through these, hormonal changes every month and the menstrual cycles and don't have this within them, they're sort of, they can't speak from any sense of personal experience.
Right, they can't relate to it.
They can't relate to it, but you're still a medical professional and should be listening when conceivably some extraordinary number of women report having extreme pain and like living most of the month in terrible pain. I mean, it's just like, so for me, it kind of goes back to that there's this huge health gap. Women are not, there's a lack of funding also in this area. So
it's incredibly convoluted. No, it's not convoluted. It's interwoven. I don't know. There's an element of it where it's like, it does feel, I guess it feels, I don't know how you manage not to feel disheartened by it, I guess, to some degree.
Well, I think for a long time, up until, I don't know, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I don't think I ever fully, you're sort of going through life and there are these problems, but until people start really writing heavily about it or talking about it more. And so if there's any sort of stigma or shame around talking about miscarriage or endometriosis or all of these other things, then you don't really think about it. You don't question it. You might come home from a doctor's appointment and say like, oh, they were really like, I don't feel listened to, but you don't necessarily associate it as being part of some bigger systemic issue.
You can't, because you can't see the whole system, right?
No,
until
but
more
now,
people talk about it. Yeah.
There's been there's a wealth of information and stories about this. Yeah. And it's kind of like with Me Too, right? That whole movement, I didn't necessarily question some of the things that happened to me as a teen or in college years as being inappropriate or inappropriate behavior from men. And then all of a sudden you look back on what you went through and you're like, oh. Yeah. So you have a new lens to look at what you're going through. And I think you can apply that to so many different things, including reproductive health.
Yeah. Yeah.
And contraception being part of that.
Yeah. I think it's eye-opening because I also recognize the difference in, It's so important. This is where like I've seen with like my mom's health or with other people in my life, the need for advocacy, whether it's self-advocacy or someone else going along with them. Because as a guy, I've been lucky enough not to need to go to the doctor for much in my life, to be honest. But when I do have an expectation of like, oh, this is what I need. Like, do it. And they're like, okay. And then they do it. And that's it, And that's a much different experience. And I think that also, it goes back to the being able to relate to other people's experiences. If your experience has only ever been that, then you also have to really introduce men to a lot, kind of like you're saying, like a breadth of stories.
Yeah.
And a lot of people coming and saying like, no, this is real. This is the way it is for us. To even get men to then be on board and be open-minded to the idea that, oh, wow, there is a problem here.
Which is why what you did is very important and that it's out there, because there aren't enough men who care enough to even write anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like sometimes you'd think it's so taxing to even tweet for some of these people. Like, and maybe with the abortion stuff and recent events this summer, I've seen, at least on Twitter, among the very progressive people I'm following, but, there are, for every one man who's willing to, comment publicly on how this is unfair, I want to try to do better, I want to learn more, there are thousands who are just like,
yep,
whatever.
Yep.
And you see the level of misinformation or misunderstanding even when it came to the baby formula shortage in the U.S. Or remember, like some men, including like mostly Republican leaders or senators or whatever, representatives, saying like, why aren't you just breastfeeding? It's like, okay, well, clearly you don't even know the multitude of reasons why that could be complicated, infringe upon daily life, make everything impossible for people. I mean, already women are like, how am I supposed to do all this?
Yeah.
And now you want to say like, oh, we have a built-in source. Like, just do that. It's like, okay, well, maybe you're looking at it as black and white, and there's
a reason this is a crisis. Yeah.
Right. So all that to say, again, I mean, this is why when men and women say we live in a patriarchal society, it's for these reasons.
Yeah.
We are an afterthought, even though we're over half the global population.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it does feel very strongly like women are second-class citizens in practicality, like even if not legally anymore. And it's not even that long ago that the laws changed, right? Like, and
we're talking about a very short span of time.
Yeah.
But as I have a friend who loves dinosaurs. I know there's a link here, by the way.
Hey, dinosaurs are always welcome.
I love them too, but he was like, I was like, why do you like them so much? And he's like, well, think about how long they lived and roamed the earth.
Yeah.
Like the Jurassic period covered millions of years.
Tens of millions, yeah.
Tens of millions of years, and we are just a blip.
Yeah.
And so to think, that book you also told me to read, which I'm reading, almost finished, 4,000 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things he highlights is that there's incremental change. And because we're so young and because we often can't see the big picture, we think things aren't moving.
Yeah.
So yeah, the laws for women are still very recent, and we expect there to be, I don't know, like radical change where everything is suddenly perfectly equal. But I think in the span of the universe.
Yeah.
But it's just that it should have been this way from the start.
Yeah, you would think so. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I think that got off. I think I was also confusing a couple of books. I think I was also confusing. Rebecca Solnit wrote, someone recommended that I read this because I was feeling a month ago, or just before vacation, I was feeling super grim, as I think you know, where I was just like, the world's ending, monkeypox is going to get us all, like, that whole spiraling I was doing. You were there for that. And this woman was like, read, it is Hope in the Dark. And I don't find Rebecca Solnit always that easy to read or, like wonderfully enjoyable, but she had very good arguments in this book. And it's not new, but it pertains, it was more written after, I think around the 2016 election. But essentially what she's saying is a similar point, which is that we are so young and you often can't see the little things that are actually changing. You know, you expect there to be some seminal moment where everything after that, where you can clearly delineate a before and after. And, you know, it's these micro movements and micro actions that turn into lasting change. But it's not because everything is a hellscape that there aren't still things happening that are going to, you know, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're going to look back on and say, okay, that was actually a very important act or thought or, you know, commentary that did change things.
Yeah. Which is helpful.
So it's a
good perspective shift, right? Like,
right. Well, and I think it's important to know that, you know, the all despair all the time, at least in narrative, is not going to help us overcome this.
No.
I struggle with finding the hope.
Yeah.
But she also writes about how to find those moments and to try to reframe your mind into thinking about how, look at the civil rights period, look at women's suffrage. Like, you take these periods and you go back and you look at how many years we're talking about and some of the individual actions that foster the change.
Right.
And, you know,
this
isn't the first time things have been grim. But back to your documentary, it's important, and this is why I often fight to have men involved in the conversation, even about my book on the Parisienne, because I'm like, if this is portrayed as only being a women's issue, we're never going to change. We're never going to move forward.
Well, I just finished Grayson Perry's book, The Descent of Man, which wasn't like anything particularly new, although he has a very interesting perspective. If you're familiar with him at all, artist from the UK. And he wrote a book just on his take on kind of like where masculinity is and why we need to change it, why we need to open it up to a plethora of definitions and the ways that people look at it. And it was good, but he makes the same argument. I think Laura Bates and Liz Plank and a number of others make the same argument, which is that, like, not only do you need men on board, but like we just need men to understand how much they have to benefit from this.
Totally.
Like, I think that it has unfortunately been cast for a long time as a women's issue, where it's like, you know, women's rights, or whether that's your health or like legal rights, civil rights, all these things, like we've cast them as like women's rights, which they are, and like women's issues as though it was the thing to do because it's the right thing to do, which is right. But we would be probably better served if we cast it in a selfish light for men to say, like, look at how much better it'll make your life. Like, look at how many opportunities it will open up for you. Look at how much more joy will be brought into the world. Look at how all these things to help men see, like, all this is true, what we've been saying over here, and it is important to do for women's, if we just even care about women, we should be doing it.
Or humans, yeah.
Or humans in general. But like, look, men, like, you also have so much to gain from this. And look at how much you're losing by not. I think for me, that's been one of the things that's also been eye-opening, is just seeing how much all these things. We've talked about it before, the documentary Female Pleasure. And it documents a bunch of different women's experience around the world, basically just being oppressed in different ways for being women or expressing themselves. And one of the things that really stood out to me more than anything, and that still stands out to me, but I think it was the first time it really, really hit me square in the face, was that at the core of all of this, we're just robbing the world of so much joy. Like, there's so many beautifully creative and wonderful, and there's so much laughter that's just robbed from the world and removed. And like, just at that level, when you see it, I think in that way, how could that not be motivating to try and do something about it?
Well, and also just the interpersonal dynamics that would be radically improved.
Yeah.
Between women and women, men and women, men and men, if everyone was just better taken care of.
Yeah. Well, yeah, men and men, I think that's the thing, is it's like you have a bunch of men standing around trying to be kind of tough and
well, and that's
whatever,
a whole other thing, like how we've raised men.
Yeah,
and
but that's kind of the point,
boys.
right? Like, for that side of bringing men into it, is the way you bring them into it is by helping them to see there's a way out of what they're trapped in. Because I don't think men realize how trapped they are. You have to wear a suit and you can't show emotions or have them unless you're just being angry. And like on and on and on. And I think there are a lot of men that's why Grayson Perry is so interesting, because he's a practicing transvestite and he loves dressing up as women, going out into public. And he has always loved that. That's just been his thing. He's married to a woman. I think he has kids. Like, he's kind of on the one hand got the nuclear family going, but then his thing is dressing up like women and getting attention for that. And it makes it a very interesting take on things, but also he's just saying, like, there are so many men out there who just don't know that this is even an option for them, and there's so much shame piled on them for that. And that goes for so many things, like whether that's taking care of kids or, you know, like all the different avenues that we've made for women now that weren't before. Like, we just have gone back and forth. High heels were made for men originally. Boys wore pink back in the early 20th century and girls wore blue. All the things that we have.
For sure. It's
like,
arbitrary.
It's just completely made up, and we just use it to kind of shove each other into these little boxes. And if we could just open those boxes up and just say, hey, like, be who you are and true to yourself, you would just live a happier, healthier life. And that in and of itself is, I think, not a bad way of framing the debate, to be like, cool, now that we're there and we want to be that way, then naturally we should.
But how do you take people out of this indoctrinated state, right?
That's the question. How do you unplug them from the matrix, so to speak?
It's also like religious devotion, unquestioning religious devotion, or people who get wrapped up into cults. Like, it's like any of these things where you need to be at least open to questioning the way we've been brought up. I mean, it's painful, but like, we can get to a better place.
Well, I think you just have to have it's kind of like you're talking about, like, part of it is, I do not have an answer for this, but I believe that part of it is opening up space like this to talk about it, so people can just even hear the ideas, maybe for the first time, or expound upon them. That's why you read these books or whatever else. But then I think it's just, a lot of it is patience. And I know for me, the way that I was raised and the world that I grew up in, like, getting out of those mentalities just took time. And I think part of it was that I did believe in compassion, and I did believe in so many things that would eventually lead me out of it naturally, because I didn't buy into so much of what I was seeing, despite the fact that I did. But I think what makes it so hard, even in that instance, and what you're talking about with, like, cults and all these other things too, is identity. And, like, if it's wrapped up in your identity and who you think you are, it becomes inherently threatening to hear any other idea, because anything that might invalidate that idea invalidates your identity, the way that you see it. And then that's where we get, like, this deep tribal fight that is being, the flames are being fanned very actively right now by the media landscape, just because it's profitable, among, I guess, so many other reasons. But I don't know if we could just, part of it is just being open to conversations. This is why I try to be open, like, whether people with, you know, that are younger or that aren't so far along the same journey I had, I try to be patient and, like, have these conversations, as painful as they can be sometimes. But it's just because, like, people were patient with me along the way.
But you're also someone who's been willing to do the reading, as we say. You know, like, you've picked up books to challenge, you know, what you think you know about certain aspects of life and what it's like for women and this and that. And I mean, like, that's the kind of thing we need more of. And the fact that you have a platform, a public platform, is how this helps. Like, that's why we need more men with platforms to help this along. Because if it's only people who, like, yes, you have to do it in your own circles, but how are people also going to be inspired to do that, to start doing that? More people, you know, who are willing to be like, I believe that X, Y, and Z, and the way we've been told women should be treated is, like, horrific and wrong, and here's what I'm trying to do about it as a man.
I think it's part of it. I think that's why, like, even though, like, the video doesn't match with my channel very well right now, it does, I think, for my OG viewers. I think that it's not a huge surprise, because I have so many vlogs about just random stuff in life. For newer viewers, it might be a little bit shocking if they just think I do Paris stuff. But that's also where I do want to find, I felt like it was really important just to talk about it, because I feel like, sure, it's cool to do this thing and have this experiment, but if you're not open about it, then the benefit is limited. And the hope is that, it does become that thing where you find ways of just talking about it with other guys. I think ultimately that's part of it too, is, like, being able and willing to talk about it with my own guy friends, any men out there that are wanting to figure out what to do. You just have to have the conversations, be willing to speak up when you hear things that are inappropriate. Obviously, don't go so far as to become like, you don't want to police your friends, but I think there are times where it's just the willingness to be like, or just to stop laughing at certain things is also
I mean,
big.
it can start small in that way.
Yeah. So whatever it is, I don't have an answer for the big picture, but I think when we talk about like also wanting to reframe this stuff to like the perspective of what can I do, I've struggled with this a lot, as you know, because we talk about this all the time. But like, I used to think that I had to save the world, basically, in a way, right? Because that was just, we're part of this redemption of the planet kind of a thing. And it was very self-sacrificing and martyry and not healthy. And now I recognize, no, it's okay to have a good life. And I should be trying to have a good life. I'm starting late to that party, so we'll see if I catch up. But the other side of that is the impact you can have is local. It's with your friends, it's with your family, it's with the people you actually come into contact with. Fortunately, I do recognize that some of what I make professionally can have that impact on people as well from afar. I think that the parasocial side of that always will make it a little bit weird, and like we have to be careful of that because it can do harm as well. I think it's not social media stuff's not an either or thing, but that's my goal then. It's like, okay, well, how do I narrow my focus down and just try to have a positive impact on the people in my life? And if I can have a net positive impact and pull people up around me just a notch, then that's at least a net positive impact. And I don't have to hold myself to some cosmic standard of, saving the universe.
And I think that's why some people are paralyzed into inaction because they feel like, well, how am I going to move the dial in any way, in any significant way? It's like, well, if your goal is to try to change an entire state or country, that's really complicated. Start with your little nugget of your circle of people.
Well, this goes back to as well, I was just going to quote Smoochie the rhino, you can't change the world, but you can make a dent. Edward Norton. But I think it is that thing where it's like, if everybody around us, if the majority of people in the world were just trying to raise their own little community up one notch, like the whole world would change. And I think that sounds patronizing, especially when it feels like you're alone and maybe you're the only person in your circle that's trying to do good or whatever it is, like, or you just isolated as we've been for the last few years. But I'm coming back to that because I do see that. I do see the positive changes that I am having in my friend circles and in a variety of ways that I feel like I've been able to, whether or not, it's definitely not all because of me, right? But like you can kind of see avenues like, oh, I can see where I had an impact here. And I think maybe just focusing in on, how do I make myself the best person that I can be, the happiest and healthiest I can be? Then how do I do that to whatever impact I can have to the people around me?
Right, because you need to be someone who's energized and mentally
Which I clearly
healthy.
have not been lately. But
No, but overall,
yeah,
it's why they say like activists who just run themselves into the ground are not going to be useful to a fight, right? You need to sometimes take a step back and rest and take care of yourself and then go back in. And it's a similar thing if you're going to try to be someone who has convictions and hopefully inspire your friend circle indirectly, sort of organically. But if you're not taking care of yourself, then that's not likely to happen either.
No.
But no, I mean, I think that in any case, we should be aligning ourselves with friends who do try to make us become better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's been one of the harder lessons learned recently, but it has been because I know too many people. And so like for me narrowing that down to be like, okay, here are the few people that I really want to make sure I'm spending time with. And a lot of that is determined based on like, how well do we get on? How good are we for each other?
Do you feel energized and inspired and stimulated? But
that's why you're one of my closest friends, is because we just get along so well. And
we have conversations that honestly, like, some of the people who are like, oh, we should get another coffee. We haven't seen each other in ages. I'm like, okay, we're not going to have this.
Yeah.
And this is actually something that I feel I need in my life.
Yeah.
So
you prioritize it.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard for people. We live in a city. We run into people all the time. We are on the internet. So people also sometimes believe they know us in a way that they don't. And people also just think like there's some endless bandwidth for having human connection. And I think you and I all probably come across to people as being very extroverted, but I think we're introvert extroverts. And so we get very exhausted too. And so it's not always that we're being difficult or we don't want to see people, but we also need to know where our energy can be best spent so that we're not constantly needing naps to get over, things that are supposed to be fulfilling.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is hard. And I think, there are other things that complicate that when you have friends who end up having kids and you don't see them as much. And, so you start trying to figure out, okay, what's important in my life? How can those people still be part of my life and give me things that I need? And also how can I get things from other individuals that I'm not getting in other places? Like we're all, you're supposed to be fulfilled by a unit, a family, a tribe, not one person.
Yeah. Which isn't the magic story we were sold as kids, but that's okay.
Oh no, I know.
There's so much unpacking. Did he fart? That's our. You're getting it. I'm protected because this side has blanket, so it's coming.
Sorry, I was like, at one point I was like,
coming out your way. I didn't smell it.
I think I need to say something.
Well, that's a good way to wrap it up, I suppose. Don't forget to buy Lindsey's book, The New Parisienne, or The New Paris. You can get both. Close your eyes, Lindsey. It's focusing on you. Oh, we got to hold on. Cover your face. Now it'll focus on the book. Maybe.
There you go.
Definitely confusing for anybody listening and not watching this. You can find her at Lindsey Tramuta on Instagram and Twitter.
Yep. And lindseytramuta.com.
Yep.
And the New Paris podcast,
Yep.
which I have to record again
Back to it.
soon. But yeah, no, there's always a way to find me.
Always wait. That sounds terrifying.
Sorry,
Always
that
a way to
was
find
not
you.
the way I wanted to end this.
There's always a way to find me. Yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks as well. I was going to say.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's so good to have you. And I also had Patron Producer lined up here. I just liked my own post because that was an accident. I was going to go with Curtis Bamford. Thanks for being our Patron Producer of the day.
Thanks, Curtis.
For this podcast, and thanks to whoever ends up sponsoring it as well. I guess we'll find out. Patrons won't have. Nobody will know for 6 months. We'll find out in 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, because basically the way this works is this season's only. Patrons get this live. So this is going to go up this week in the next couple days for my patrons. But then this whole season gets held back until the next season starts.
Right. Okay.
So season 1 is going public as this one goes live.
Got it.
And there's always going to be a delay. It's like 6-month delay, I think, for people that aren't on the ball.
Well, good thing everything we talked about is timeless. Sorry.
Not everything, but yeah, most of it is timeless. Yeah. But we'll get some more timely stuff in there next week or in 2 weeks with the actual monologue. I think I will go in a bit of a deep dive, like the behind the scenes, answer some questions like what do we make coffee with the same kettle? All kinds of questions from the swimmers video.
Oh,
and
I was like, what are you talking about? Oh.
And yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more. If you have questions about that, obviously leave them below on the Patreon post for this, and we'll see you again in a couple weeks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.